Pep, I have one thing to say. You better vote, bitch. Not that you're a bitch, but I just want you to vote. It just felt like it went along with the thing. You understand. It's not personal. You get that, right? Okay, thank you. Go vote, everyone. Go to vote.org. Make sure you're registered. The opinions expressed by guests on Town Hall, a Black Queer podcast, are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the podcast host, Bob the Drag Queen and Peppermint, the podcast production team, or the organization Black Queer Town Hall. Each participant is chosen for their unique perspective relevant to the theme of their featured episode. While we strive to provide a platform for diverse voices and narratives, individual opinions may vary, and listeners are encouraged to engage critically and respectfully with the content and the people presented.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Town Hall, a Black Queer podcast, the podcast with Bob the Drag Queen and me, Peppermint. This is where we journey through a theme, sharing stories, music, poetry, and art of varying depth and hilarity. Now, today is part 2 of our episode opening for our season 4 extravaganza, The Black Vote.
And we're talking, yes, honey, we're talking about people from all over the political spectrum about their Black vote, and we are really running the gamut. I really advise you go back and listen to episode 1 of season 4 to see part 1. If you're just joining us now, please go back and check it out. We had we had 2 really amazing people join us from opposite ends of the spectrum, and today we're going to get some more voices sprinkled up in this piece.
That's right. Now, before we hear from our guests, please let's do a quick history lesson just to set the stage. Because we can't talk about the Black vote without talking about the era right after the Civil War, which was Reconstruction. Now, during this time, newly freed Black cis men were granted the right to vote through the 15th Amendment passed in 1870.
But of course, they didn't make it easy. Things like poll taxes, literacy tests, and violent intimidation from the KKK and other white supremacist groups, like the police, became common tactics to keep Black men from voting, especially in the South.
And it wasn't until nearly a century later, that cis Black women were granted the right to vote in 1965, a full 45 years after white women, by the way. Now, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was supposed to end discriminatory policies. Supposed to. But that's when folks like Martin Luther King Jr., John Lewis, and Fannie Lou Hamer led massive efforts to register Black voters despite all the barriers that were thrown in their way.
And here we are today, still fighting. In recent years, we've seen voter suppression rear its ugly head again, whether it's through voter ID laws, purging voter rolls, or their all-time favorite, a good old gerrymandering, which is a drag name I hate. Give it up for gerrymander.
I'm sure there is someone with that drag name. Yeah, in Georgia, I think they purged 1 million names from the voter rolls this year, which is one of the things they said they were going to do, and they did it. So it is absolutely no accident. It is a deliberate attempt to silence Black voices and disenfranchise people from accessing their Black power.
And here is where it gets really important for us. As Black queer folks, the intersection of our identities means that political issues often hit us from multiple sides. Can we talk about intersectionality? Voting isn't just about who gets elected, it's about access to health care, protections for LGBTQ people, and criminal justice reform, and so much more. Do you ever wonder why they tell you that once you have a felony, you can't vote? But meanwhile, Black people make up over 50% of the prison population, and yet we are less than half of the white population. I keep telling folks, it is not possible. It is statistically impossible for Black people to commit more crime than white people. Listen to me, y'all. If every single Black person in America, all of us, women, children, non-binary, old, disabled, all of us were committing crime, and only half of the white people were committing crime, they would still be committing more crime than us. Let's think about the numbers,
just like
people.
food stamps. And that's because we're only 13% of the population. But, a lot of times people are misled by misinformation. So, who
What
we
do you mean just
vote
like
into
food? Wait, what do
office.
you mean just like food stamp? I
Well,
didn't.
there's a misnomer that Black people are running
Oh,
rampant in with food stamps. The whole thing about like a welfare queen is this sort of
God, yeah,
archetype of a Black woman who's taken advantage of the system, gaming the system, and
yeah.
getting money that we don't deserve.
Now I get it.
When white folks overwhelmingly are consumers of social assistance and financial assistance and food assistance programs in this country simply because they make up more of us.
Well, the real truth
Uh,
is most people getting money from the government, it's not even private citizens. Most of the money goes to massive corporations. Massive corporations. If we want to talk about
exactly,
government assistance.
which is exactly why who we vote into office determines whether our communities have protections against discrimination, whether our rights to marry and adopt children are upheld, and whether we have the right to seek gender affirming care. And at its most basic level, whether we're safe to exist in our Black queer bodies in public spaces.
Listen, the black votes matters, but when you add the lens of queerness, it becomes even more urgent. And let's not forget, the black vote has historically been a driving force for change. Black
Mm.
women and black queer people in particular are often the backbone of progressive movements in this country. We were lucky enough to have a very iconic black queer woman on our very first town hall, Dr. Angela Davis, and she
Angela
shared a lot of insight
Davis.
with us. Which, real quick, a lot of folks
Yes.
are weirded out that not weirded out. A lot of folks who are new to like not I don't count. I don't want to be like young folks, but like folks like I can't believe Angela Davis was telling people to go vote for Kamala Harris. Angela Davis has been telling y'all to vote for a long time. Angela Davis has been like, vote. Y'all crazy? She does it every year. This is not news.
Yeah.
Angela Davis has been saying vote.
Well, I
Who are you
think
gonna listen
there's
to?
an
Ice Cube or Angela Davis? Let me tell you right now, because Ice Cube told black folks not to vote. When you choose your North Star, is it going to be Dr. Angela Davis or the guy from Dad's Trip? You tell me.
Are you asking me?
I'm asking them.
Oh, well, they can't answer back.
They can comment. They can write in the comment section.
They can comment. They can comment. Listen, I mean, I don't know that our audience is listening to Ice T.
Ice
Um,
Cube.
but was Ice Cube? I don't know.
Yeah.
The point is that we look, Dr. Angela Davis has she's demonstrated where she lies politically uh, for decades, and she's definitely earned her stripes in this conversation for sure.
I
And
agree.
I think people don't. I think one of the things that people are struggling with, especially right now, especially with folks who are very concerned, I think rightfully so, with the anti-war sentiment and where to place an anti-war vote right now. Um, People are seeing sort of the American voting system, the what we thought was the American voting system, sort of crumbling before our eyes. Just like a person who maybe is in school and grows up, and graduates from high school, thinks that all milk comes from a farm a farmer who's wearing a flannel shirt and a pitchfork and hand feeds the animals like old McDonald fantasy, would realize that we have an industrialized farming system that is like
Exactly.
it's
And now
chemicals and all types of stuff.
everyone knows that milk comes from a cashew udder. You milk the cashew, and that's how you get milk.
Just like people thought that, the medical system was like a doctor with an apple on the desk and then, an apple a day, whatever, like now we see that the healthcare system is just like a lot bigger than we thought. The same thing with the voting system. So I think that but it is important for people to participate because the a lot of the issues that we want, it's yes, it's important to march for certain things. Yes, it's important to demonstrate. Yes, it's important to have important conversations, tough conversations that we would have. It's a lot of times with family members who may or may not agree with what we want or how we feel. But at the end of the day, a lot of times in this country right now, a lot of the times the decisions that are going to be made have to do with money and power, and that money and power, the access to that money and power, lies within the halls,
Yeah.
lies within the buildings, and the way to access those, if you're not running for office, is to vote. There are
Listen,
other ways, but that's one of the key ways.
the system
And so
is
it's an
designed.
ongoing fight. Every ballot, every election, at every level, every single vote counts. That's my point.
Yeah, the system is designed to make us feel like it doesn't count, right? To make us feel powerless, but we are not powerless. We have the numbers, and when we show up, we make history. I always say this: you can exclude yourself from the democratic process, but you cannot exclude yourself from the results of democracy. Whether you vote or not, politics will affect you. You cannot excuse yourself from the
Mm.
consequences of democracy. You can choose not to vote, but the politics will happen to you. Politics are non-consensual. Politics will happen to you. You don't have to want to be a part of politics for politics to impact your life positively or negatively.
I think that one thing is really important to note this time around, with so many important issues that one could be thinking of. If you are like a leftist or progressive voter, um, one thing to keep in mind is what you would want to see happen with the Supreme Court. That's one issue that's a federal issue that's on a national level. That's not, I speak usually when I speak in terms of voting, it's about the local vote. But voting for the Supreme Court is something that um, that's something that is tied to our vote and indirectly, but we can clearly see the impact that voting has had on the Supreme Court in the last election, in the last two elections rather. And
Yeah.
so that is one thing that
Last
those
like
of
last
us who
couple
are,
elections, Obama.
yeah, last two elections. Well, certainly, I mean, every election, but those of us who are of voting age now, if we're younger, can see, at least since Trump was president, the impact, the consequence of voting or not voting, and the impact that that had on the Supreme Court. And that's always going to be a thing. And
Yeah.
so thinking about the Supreme Court is important. Right now, I'm thinking about, for instance, out of Tennessee, there's a case for against gender affirming care that's making its way through the court system and will be heard by the Supreme Court. And this will be a precedent setting vote, or precedent setting case, decision by the Supreme Court that will not only determine access to gender affirming care for trans people, but moreover, it'll determine access to abortion and reproductive, honestly, not even abortion, not only abortion, but all reproductive justice and access, things like IUDs and
IVF.
IVF and you know all types of contraception and I mean, it's like the sky is the limit because this will really open it up and make it very vague, and put the decision in the government's hands. Depends on which government that's going to be. And so that's one example of how, for people who are really feeling very fraught this election, if you are Black and queer and you're feeling torn, there are several things to keep considering. And I know that that if you're a voting age, but please, please, please be intersectional with your vote.
Would you ever run for politics?
No. Have
Me
I
either.
ever?
I said, would
Did
you
you ask,
ever?
have I ever run for
No,
politics?
I said, would you ever?
Oh. Yeah, I probably would.
You think
There's a
so?
chance.
I don't have it in me. I don't have what it takes. And also, I've said so much problematic stuff. I'd be buried immediately
Mm.
over the
Well,
years.
one of the things that I wouldn't even begin to run for office at a larger than state level if money were if money in the future of elections plays as crucial and essential a part in the outcome of the elections as it does now.
What do you mean by that?
Ever since, I think it was after Ronald Reagan, um, or maybe Nixon, like around the early '80s. Co- Campaign contribution laws drastically changed, and basically, it used to be illegal to bribe politicians, and now it's not.
Which is wild. I mean, it's kind of wild to me that Donald Trump has this whole platform where he's like, we're not doing any renewable drill, baby, drill, which is crazy because Joe Biden has drilled way more than he ever drilled. And he's like, if we just drill, the prices will go lower. Meanwhile, Joe Biden is the drillingest president that has ever existed. And it does, that's not how that works. But he's like, yeah, we're just gonna drill, baby, drill, just drill. We're gonna have so many fucking holes offshore and onshore. It's gonna look like Swiss cheese up in this bitch.
Mm.
And he thinks that's going to,
Keep an
drastically
eye
lower
on.
the cost of everything, and that's just how that works, which tells me that he probably doesn't have a real understanding of economics.
But he wouldn't be an outlier from a lot of people in our country. Don't have I don't even have a very deep understanding of
Yeah, but you're not
economics.
running
I
for
didn't study that in
president.
school.
You're
And
not a former
when
president. He's the former president. He's not some guy. He's not
I
running the
know he
bodega.
is.
You know what I mean? And also, he has people in his ear who are trying to tell him that, who are like, "Oh yeah, by the way, do you guys know Donald Trump doesn't read his daily briefings? He just doesn't read them. He refuses to read them. We have to make them readable, or just give him the headlines. He will not read the daily briefings. That's wild."
But I know, and I don't mean to throw our people under the bus because I do think Americans we have access, human beings in the world have access to an unbelievable amount of information, which is sometimes overwhelming. But I do think that the amount of information that we have access to versus how we seem to be making our decisions, there's like a huge chasm between that. And so I would imagine that people who only read the headlines and don't read the articles are more common than not,
Well, I can see how it seems scary. I mean,
unfortunately.
think about Canada versus America. There are just more politicians here. There are so many politicians,
And
people
they
working.
campaign for 2 years of
And this is
millions of
this this is for
dollars.
lieutenant
Millions of dollars for
governors.
two
This is
years.
for dog catcher. This is for senators. This is for presidents. This is for vice. There are so many positions you have to think
The
about.
dog
Where
catcher.
Whereas in Canada, which has 10% of the population of America, maybe the politics might be a little bit easier to understand as opposed to America, which has 335 million people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
It's
I do.
spooky. It's so spooky.
Season. Okay,
Okay.
well, now let's hear from some of our community members on the Black vote.
All right. First, we're going to speak to Camilla. They are a 19-year-old Dominican Afro Caribbean makeup artist born and raised in Manhattan, New York City. And Camilla tells us how excited she is to cast her vote in her very first presidential election. I remember that, honey. Camilla, tell us about it. Let's hear from them.
My name is Cami. I'm an Afro Caribbean makeup artist born and raised in Harlem. I'm currently living in Midtown. So kind of a big jump in environment, but my heart is still uptown. I came out more so when I moved over here. Um, it's kind of complicated because it's not like I wasn't accepted, but it was more so like I'm first generation, so my mother is an immigrant, so naturally for her it's like very foreign territory. Um, she used to work at nightclubs and stuff, so she's been around like most people that have like walked the walk of life. Um, but when it came to me, it was always like, this is just a phase. You don't know what you are yet. Wait it out. And I'm 19 now, and I came out when I was about like 12, 13, and I still feel the same. Nothing has really changed. I still identify as bisexual. Um, and I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of that because I feel like that gives me such a open-minded perspective on people, not to mention like just not just queer people, but like just all sorts of people, whether it's homeless people, disabled people. Like I feel like it gives me a very open-minded idea of like what people are like, and also because I was kind of raised around less fortunate people, so I understand from like an outside perspective what they went through, but I can't exactly like, okay, well, I did come from like a less fortunate family. I wouldn't say we were like poor, but we were able to be stable. I was raised in the projects, so like I wouldn't necessarily say like, me personally, in my experience living in the projects, I don't consider it a bad thing because I feel like I have made more relationships and like really tight relationships with people there rather than where I currently am. So it was a really big jump from environments because I went from being in this neighborhood where everybody knew me, everybody knew my parents, and now here it's like you kind of like in your own little bubble and nobody really likes to talk to anybody unless like you talk to them. But um yeah, like definitely living in the projects has made me see how the system really treats people. Um, I have seen countless people like been arrested before, and all of which were unfortunately young black men. And I didn't understand it as a kid, but now that I'm older, I see like really the truth and like what are the intention of like these people with power and things like that. And I feel like that's really molded my views on politics because I wouldn't really consider I don't really know how to label myself in like terms of politics, but I'm able to see the bad in both sides. So I choose not to like just pick one side. I seem to like try to pick apart everything and try to get my like facts straight before I can make an opinion, if that makes any sense. Well, from when I was raised in the projects, there was cops in the area all the time, every single night, and over small things as especially like there would be this one elderly man that the entire neighborhood knew, and he used to play music every night and just be there with his like other neighbors, and the cops would always harass him and tell him to stop the music, and at some point they arrested him too, and he was always so sweet. Like he always said hi to me and my father and everybody else. What I see personally is that they're trying to silence us and prevent us from just having a normal life, honestly. And it's been like that for the longest time, even before like the three of us were alive, unfortunately. And that brings me to another thing. I watched this show recently. Maybe you guys have heard of it. It's called Them the Scares. I believe it's a Jordan Peele series and it's a black anthology series. And it really opened my eyes as to what people really went through back then. Like it was quite literally everybody like on defense, like scared 24/7. And that hurts to see because those people had to walk that walk for us to walk unscathed and, you know, live our life the way we want, you know, and it's really sad. Um, and they really lean into the horrors of being black and the reality that we face about with being black, and it really like it really made me realize like there's a lot that I haven't seen. There's a lot of things that I haven't heard, and that series really did like show me so many things that were just like not only grotesque but just humanity at its worst, especially with cops, misogyny, and just everything that affected all of us back then. But yeah, I think I highly recommend uh like whether you're a person of color or not, I think everybody should watch that show at least once because it really does educate you on things that you thought you knew. We see all these conservatives that are trying to tear down queer and just marginalized groups, And those people are a product of lack of education. Especially ones that really lean into it and like don't even bother to learn, like that is unfortunately a product of lack of education. And I am very grateful to have lived in such a diverse city where I was put in school with many different colors of people, many sorts of people with certain disabilities. Like I was raised around so much, so I feel like that has really contributed to how I see the world. I am going to participate this year. At first, I was not because Joe Biden was still in the race. Um, and picking apart the situation, it was really hard. And I know I'm not the only one. I'm sure for everybody, it was really hard to choose one. But now that Joe Biden has stepped down, I feel more drawn to the idea of voting because I feel like now is the time where we really have to. And I really didn't want to vote for Joe Biden because of things that he's like said, such as like the whole Zionism thing. I don't know if you guys saw him say that online, but that was shocking. Um, and I was like, I don't want to vote for this man. Like, he is the lesser of the two evils, but I don't want to like support that. So, in that moment of like feeling conflicted, then Kamala takes his place, and then I was like, oh, I might actually vote for her. And not just because she's a black woman, but she stands for things that a lot of people without voices can't stand for themselves for. Like Tim Walz, for example, um, he's trying to protect trans rights and things alike. And it seems like Kamala and Walz are like the only people right now really trying to protect that and just other things as well, not just trans people, but I'm going to vote for Kamala personally, just because I feel like she's protecting things that the conservatives and the Republicans want to fully eliminate. And they have no remorse for it, I personally feel like. And I feel somewhat confident in my decision to vote for Kamala. Of course, like, I won't sit here and idolize her because she is a politician at the end of the day. And you shouldn't be idolizing anybody, let alone a politician. Because we're all human, we make mistakes and we say things that we'll may or may not regret. So I will be voting for her this year. I really don't know how to feel about voting because for the longest time, even when I was a kid, it kind of felt like voting really didn't do anything, especially like people online discoursing whether voting really does affect anything at all. But I personally think it does because look at when we voted in Joe Biden. A lot of people like look at his actions and then fully blame it on him. But we have to realize that when presidents put in certain things through Congress or all these laws, like it takes a while before it actually happens. Sometimes even like the next presidency. So I'm not like justifying Joe Biden at all, but we can't fully blame everything that has happened in the past 4 years on him because Trump has said and done a lot of things that is currently affecting us now and just now because now we have a different president, so all these other things are like starting to actually come into play and people are starting to blame it all on Joe Biden. But remember who was the president before him. He's not innocent either. And I feel like with the higher ups, like I feel like there's a lot that they can really be doing, but they're going blindsided to what's really important right now. Like look at the housing crisis and look at like there has been a staggering amount of homelessness in the city. Like almost every corner you go to, there's a homeless person. And it's very unfortunate. And it feels like no one's trying to help them. They're only just tearing them down and making them more mentally ill. That's another thing. I feel like our society does not value mental health, especially with Black people, enough. And even for the longest time, Black people have been like the epicenter of mental health and things like that because throughout history we've endured that the most. And in that show that I watched, actually, like, I saw exactly like things that happened to people that really did drive them to these breaking points that so-called made them crazy, according to the outer, like, shell of people. But I think it's very important to draw attention, especially like this is what protesting exists, because if we're trying to be so kind about like wanting change and it's not happening, then they're only giving us the option to protest, because no justice, no peace. It really just is that. Like, if if kindness and respectfulness doesn't work, then we know what to do. We know we have to stand up and like scream what we want to happen, because otherwise it just won't happen. You know, with the whole George Floyd thing, especially, like, I've noticed there has been a huge conversation with racism and how it's been affecting us. And it's equal parts good, but equal parts bad, because I've been seeing a large amount of conservatives sneaking their way onto the internet and really getting under people's skin, especially people, for example, like, let's say people of color that are alternative, like myself. Like, I consider myself a goth and also a metalhead. And I've noticed that those two subcultures are the most political, because that's how the subcultures were built on. Especially like the punk subculture, it was about going against the system and anti-capitalism and all those other things. And it when these conservatives come online into alternative and black spaces, I see people instantly getting upset and biting back. But for not I noticed that a lot of people don't sit for a moment and realize that they are being blinded by their own stupidity and their own just lack of knowledge. One thing I'd actually like to touch base on is like the alarming wave of Gen Z people like myself online, and how they approach politics and just people's opinions online. Um, it feels like every time, let's say, I open TikTok or Instagram and I see like a post from an alternative creator, there's so much unnecessary discourse over little things. And whether you're doing your eyeliner right or this and that, and it's like there is more things that we can be worried about rather than things like that. I think a lot of people, especially in my generation, are too focused on things that are not that important. And when, okay, like when when, let's say, people like myself actually talk about things that are important, then those people online get at you, and then they're like, oh no, it should be this way, it should be this way, because it feels like they're so trapped in like this online mindset that they can't really have like real conversations without feeling the need to put their opinions before someone else's, you know? I actually did see, I forgot which episode this was. I think this was an episode of Sibling Rivalry where Bob was talking about how Gen Z is like one of the largest voting groups right now. And I personally think that's a really good thing, but it can go really wrong if we don't know how to use this voting privilege, because not everybody has the right to vote. There's people that are incarcerated. There's people that are just less fortunate that can't vote. So us as a new generation, I feel like my generation sees a lot of the world issues more than, like, let's say Gen X, because they were raised in this very old fashioned way. And my generation has seen a lot of things. And also, even with mental health, like, I feel like my generation acknowledges these issues a lot more than like generations before us. Like, not in, I won't say entirely, but like, I do think that my generation actually does like shine a light on a lot of these issues, because especially now, because we're being affected as it, especially like all of us are just stepping into adulthood. And just the economy and housing and even food, it's difficult right now. And we're so frustrated that now we have to actually speak about it. And now that we can vote, I feel like it's great that we can, because now we can actually like talk about these issues, and whether the higher ups like it or not, like we're gonna still talk about it because it's affecting our everyday lives. Like, tell me why a sandwich at the deli is like $12 now. I really do hope that our country and society can better itself in the next couple of years, especially because I personally think Kamala is going to win. I've been seeing a lot of people that don't want to vote steering towards her, and I feel pretty positive that she will win this year. I feel like with her in office, we could really change a lot of things that already are like implemented and all these other things. And if Kamala really plays her cards right, I think she could be a fantastic president. I'm not going to say perfect, because nobody is perfect, but I do think she could make some really bold decisions that could really help people, especially now more than ever. And I as a black woman, seeing her on that ballot, it's like there's been so many people that have lost their lives and have gone through just the unspeakable for this very moment to happen, you know? Especially in the South. And like, I have a family member who was raised in North Carolina, and or South Carolina, one of the two. And he used to have to like shine people's shoes when he was a kid. And he's still alive. He's just in the other room right now. And he has been through a lot. And now that we have somebody that can like ever so slightly relate to that, it makes me feel secure, because I feel like she understands and she can direct us in the right path.
Oh my God, I do remember. I mean, we talked about this on the last episode, the very first vote. But do you like, were you that excited? Were you scared, nervous? Like, what was the feeling that you remember getting ready to vote
So I remember
for the
going
first
down to
time?
vote for John Kerry. I remember thinking to myself, we can't let Al Gore happen again. I remember thinking about climate change a lot. It was like a big
Because of Al Gore.
because of Alfred Gore. I don't know that his name is Alfred. I don't know Al Gore's real name. Because of Al Gore, and this was a big deal to me. Climate change was a really, really big topic of discussion in the year 2004, and apparently, it's obviously still going on today because it's been exacerbated by time. And
But it's not quite a topic of discussion, even though we're having this huge hurricane come through,
yeah,
where we had it
um,
a couple weeks ago.
yeah. And so I was excited. I was excited to go vote. I remember getting into a very heated political debate in the theater department with the one Bush supporter we had there, and it was like 20v1. It was giving Jubilee. It was 20v1.
Ooh,
We were
that is
dogpiling this
giving
man. Like
Jubileesha.
we were dogpiling him. We were like, well, what about?
Jubilation.
But he was also a non-traditional freshman, so we were all very young, and
What's that?
he was not 18.
An older?
He was
Okay.
older. He was a scotch older. And we were all teenagers in early 20s, um, and just letting them have it.
It's Albert Arnold
Albert
Gore.
Arnold Gore, the inventor of the internet, darling. Did you know that what's her name came out and said that she invented Instagram? Have you seen this?
Who?
Jamie Lee Curtis has claimed several times that she invented Instagram. Go look it up. I won't give you any further details. Just go and look up Jamie Lee Curtis
I'm not going to
invented
drag
Instagram.
her. I'm not going
Just
to drag her.
go look it up. Go do your own research.
I can't even stand that saying anymore.
I know. I say it. I say it as a bit. Do your own research. I say it as a bit these days.
Facetiously.
Yeah. Which, by the way, I want to tell you all, it is okay. I want to be very clear. This is not journalism. Peppermint and I are not journalists. Peppermint are having conversations. We are bringing Black voices together. We are not journalists. This is not journalism. Okay. Journalism is a very, very serious profession that people study for years to know how to do. Pep and I are opinionated people, and we want to hear from other people's opinions, and we want to bring the Black queer community together to to raise our voices. That is what we're
Whoever
doing.
accused us of being journalists?
No, but a lot of people think that like Alex Jones and Candace Owens and they think that's
Mm,
journalism. They think what they're doing, their commentary, they think is journalism. They're like, go to independent news sources, baby. That's not news. That's not journalism. Those are opinion pieces.
it's opinion.
Those are
No,
opinions. And we are standing here. We are not news. We are just having conversation with people. That's all we're doing.
it's the truth. I'm unqualified. Goodbye.
Gang. Me too. Bring in Joy
uh,
Reid. Joy Reid would do a better job at if you want to go to news, go to Joy Reid. I love Joy Reid. I'm a big Joy Reid fan, by the way.
I think she's gorgeous.
And who's that one guy that
Um,
I love? That one guy. He's a black guy, kind of short and like round. Oh, what is his name?
Short and round.
Don't say around, not
Doesn't sound
brown,
familiar.
round.
Oh, excuse
And
me.
he is fiery, and I love him. I can't remember his name. We'll figure it out
On
later.
what is he?
I can't. I literally can't remember. I don't remember. I don't remember. I want to stop dragging it because I can't remember.
Pew, 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 pew. Drop a note in the comments. Let us know what news sources you do listen to, what
Yeah.
you classify as news. Like who are you listening to these days besides myself and Bob? We want to know because they're saying that the younger population gets most of their news and information from obviously the internet, but like independent sources that are not, mainstream network news. And so that'll be interesting to find out. But in the meantime, we have Jenks, who is a writer and abolitionist located in Atlanta, Georgia. Hey, Bob. And his writing is featured in Black and queer owned publications, including his interviews with Laverne Cox and Ashton Sanders.
And write her own
Please
town hall.
welcome. Oh, that's right. Oh my gosh. Welcome back to the pod. Welcome back to the podcast in the from the Unrequited Love episode. Let's give it up for Jenks.
My name is Jenks, and I was on the Unrequited Love episode. I was born in Mishawaka, Indiana. It's next to South Bend. If you're familiar with sports, Notre Dame is there. I grew up with my single mother, a white woman. I'm also half Black. My father is Ghanaian and Nigerian. We grew up lower class, Section 8 housing. And I think a lot of the people around me realized that I was queer before I did. I think as a kid, some people like to put terms like feminine or effeminate or whatever onto you when you're literally just a child figuring out what life is like. And so I think after years of ridicule and being made fun of and being excluded from a lot of my peers in the neighborhood and my high school and growing up, I started dating someone when I was 16. And that was like my first I had experimented a lot as a kid, but I think uh, actually dating someone and falling for someone then was sort of the first realization of, oh, you're not just playing around or, using my mother was I would say a Pentecostal Christian, praying in tongues, all of that stuff. And so I think all of the experimentation that I was doing as a kid, I had convinced myself that it was a phase or that I was okay because I didn't pursue particular actions in those temporary relationships. But I think once I became a teenager and went to high school and started dating someone, I really realized it. And then when I turned 18 and went to college, like immediately came out as gay because it was a pretty Indiana University is the school in Bloomington is a pretty open, accepting as much as it can be for Indiana University. So that was sort of my coming out. And I want to mention as well, because some of the terminology that I will likely use, I'll be talking a lot about what's going on in Gaza and in Palestine and all of that. So I want to make sure that like people know that I'm I want to make sure that I'm being respectful and mindful of every listener and where people are coming from. Again, I mentioned that I'm like biracial, Jewish, grew up lower class, and so when it comes to wanting to ensure that everyone, and when I speak about people, especially people, I'm not Palestinian or when I speak on things, I'm not a political commentator. I just uh, use social media and read books and try to become and be as informed as I can. And so, not to say that you can be a part of a marginalized group and not be self-hating. I think for folks listening, like we know what an Uncle Tom or a raccoon is. So just because I'm X, Y, and Z doesn't mean that I couldn't be self-hating. But I just want to make that designation for the sake of like showcasing my intersectionality because uh, I touch a lot of different facets and groups. I think after October 7th, which is sort of the what happened at the music festival in Israel between Hamas and the Israeli forces, I did a lot of my own researching and just trying to understanding the conflict in the area. And I know that our current presidential election and politics in this country, there's so much more going on, right? We have police brutality, we have inflation, we have homelessness, we have teachers who can't even afford to buy their own school supplies. And a lot of that ties into where a lot of our money in this country is going, which, as hopefully a lot of people listening know, a lot of that is going to places like Israel to fund war. It's going to Ukraine to fund war. So I think at the forefront of my mind, and I think a lot of people's minds for this next election is like nobody wants Trump because we all know who Trump is. And I think you hear the term vote for the lesser of two evils often, which I feel like in this case is Kamala Harris. And I think that when I look back to 2020, when it was happening then between Biden and Trump, I felt like I was doing the same thing. I was really jazzed to vote for Biden. I was like, we just have to keep Trump out of office. Doesn't matter what we do, just got to keep Trump out. And I think at that time, I was somewhat an informed voter, but I think I absolutely wasn't as informed as I am now. And back then, when I voted for Biden, I'll never forget. I was living in Los Angeles. I was in my light soaked loft apartment in downtown LA right off of Main Street. And I remember when Biden won, like people were cheering in the streets. I was cheering. And embarrassingly, I like cried because I was like, yay, we did it. We prevented Donald Trump from being in office. And it was like this collective sigh of relief. And now here we are 4 years later, sort of in a very similar position. But like when you look at the two candidates, do I think one is blatantly worse than the other by what they say? Yes, and to me that would be Donald Trump. But I think you can't ignore or erase the fact that Kamala is unequivocal in her support of funding wars and the Israeli sort of the not sort of the Israeli occupation of Palestine and the cleansing of Palestinians, and that is a domino effect in so much of what's going on in this country, from more police trained in Israel. Our police in this country, in basically every state, go to Israel to train with the it's the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. I call them the IOF, the Israeli Occupation Forces, because they're not defending anything. They're just occupying the space and cleansing Palestinians. And I think that uh, you can't, if a genocide of another group of people isn't your sort of red line for why you wouldn't vote for a candidate. I think that that's something that everyone has to sit with. I would say that people who support Donald Trump, racism wasn't their sort of red line to say, you know what, maybe we shouldn't. It wasn't a deal breaker for them. You kind of have to decide for yourself. Again, you're kind of picking the lesser of two evils, but I finally got to a place where I'm done voting for the lesser evils, which is why I'm voting for Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate, because she has been uh, uh, consistent with her platform of reparations for Black people, Medicare for all, taking funding from the war machine and police and reallocating that to end uh, the suffering of lower class and now even middle class people in this country who can't afford groceries. And so, yeah, long-winded way to say I have a lot of thoughts, but and I'm excited for the commentary around the debate more than I think I am the debate, because I think they're both going to say the same thing. But yeah, my eyes have been opened after October and everything that has happened, and my vote is going to Jill Stein. So after it was announced that she would be replacing Biden on the ticket, it took over a month, I believe, for her to actually put her policy positions on her page. And I know I keep speaking about the genocide for happening to Palestinians, but that phrasing that is used has been the same repeat phrasing that's on her website. She stated it during the DNC of, we're going to have I forget exactly how she phrased it, but we're going to have I'm committed to the strongest or most ruthless military in the world. And there were just moments that I wanted to just watch to see if somebody would surprise me. Like, it would be great to have a Palestinian speak on behalf of what's happening, but they decided not to platform Palestinians. They decided to platform Republicans and, seemingly giving everyone else a platform. And I think that uh, what she stands for to me was very clear, which is the Democrats have endless supply of money and weapons for other countries. There's no ban on guns in this country still to this day. There was just a shooting in Georgia. A number of people were killed, and we've got thoughts and prayers, and we've got the promise, because it's an election season, that we're going to focus on gun control. But you kind of have to take a step back and think, especially as queer people, right? We are still fighting for our rights to be safe and to exist in this country. And I think it's not funny, but again, it's ironic that whenever you speak about Israeli genocide of Palestinians or supporting Congo or Sudan, people are like, "Oh, well, you're gay. They would, they would hurt you there, or they would kill you there," things like that. And it's like, one, that is just like a dog whistle response to say, like, "Oh, well, you shouldn't support liberation of a group of people because my perception of them is they don't like your existence," which is, again, just like a major generalization about Congolese people, Palestinians, etc. But we face that in this country. Half of this country, at least it seemingly seems, half of this country is against queer, trans, non-binary liberation. And so the fact that we are still it reminds me of that meme where it's like you've got Democrats at the top, Republicans at the bottom, and then two airplanes next to each. And it's like the Republican airplane is just like dropping bombs, and then the Democrat airplane is also dropping bombs, but it's covered in like a rainbow flag and like pride and Black Lives Matter and all this stuff. um I just want to laugh, but long-winded way answer. Yes, I did watch snippets of the DNC, and I think it was I was disappointed, and it was more of just sort of this Chat GPT very generalized response about what she's going to do, and uh, have really yet to see. And this is what you have to remember too: she's still the VP. Joe Biden is still president, and their ticket and everything that they've done isn't really. Um, there's nothing tangible for me. Again, I'm, work hard, like middle class, like I'm privileged in multiple ways, but people who I see who aren't as privileged, like homelessness is still going up. You have um, a lot of Democratic cities. I used to live in LA. You've got Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, who was on the streets, like himself, clearing homeless people out. Like, there's pictures and video of him like carrying their stuff and trying to move that out. And this is a place where, and that's a Democrats sell themselves of being, we got to fight homelessness, but like give them a place to be and fund mental health services and things like that. But I feel like there's a lot of hypocrisy happening. And I think for the first time in mass, you're seeing a lot of us who, again, I consider myself a liberationist, but I think a lot of us are finally, we've sort of been awake, but we've also been voting for the lesser evil. And I think there are a lot of people who refuse to do that anymore. And I feel the awakening and the liberation is finally starting to happen for this country. I think it's really powerful and impactful to have like a biracial Black and Asian woman who will likely become the first woman, the first like biracial Black Asian president in this country. I think that gives people a lot of hope and excitement. And there's a part of me that sees that as progress. But to me, it's similar to the concept of like ethical billionaires. Take Rihanna. Love Rihanna, love her music, love that she's in her bag, love her family, love what she's done for pop culture. But like she's a billionaire and she owns Fenty and all of these companies that, in order to become a billionaire, have to exploit workers for their labor, right? And so, like, when you have this capitalist sort of society, you can respect what somebody has done and their contribution to something, but also hold them accountable for the impact that they have on how they got to the position that they're in. And with Kamala, I, again, it's just so much of the same. I think I like to think of it as I've been thinking about this line, and I actually found a really good screenshot of this recently, where it's like you have the left and you have the right and you have center, and I think everyone believes and feels like Democrats are on the left, Republicans are on the right, and on the right you have like fascism, racism, police brutality, uh, only caring about the super rich, white supremacy, so on and so forth. And then on the left, you're supposed to have Democrats, which is queer, trans, non-binary rights. You're supposed to have uh, like equal pay, ending homelessness, like sort of freedom for all. And what I'm finding is every time we vote for one of these Democrats who sell themselves on a ticket of being more inclusive and doing more for the marginalized people of this country, what happens is, or voters, and this is what voters say, no, you got to just vote for the lesser of two evils because we have to prevent fascism, because under Trump, like Project 2025 and all these scary, very real realities that could happen under Trump. So it's like vote for the lesser of evils. So I feel like we've been doing that for a while. But what's happening is the people who say vote for the lesser of two evils so we can push them left, we're not, like, no one has moved left. No one in the Democratic Party, like Kamala is not, or she hasn't up to this point moved left on anything that people have been asking for. And so what you have is, I know I'm still holding my hands up, is what you have is where you think Democrats are here, they're actually closer, they're actually past the center, closer to the right, because under Biden, you still have universities calling the police on peaceful protesters. You have, again, more police, I think, than ever. I'll keep speaking to Los Angeles, but we voted in Karen Bass last election cycle, a Democrat, over, I forget his name. He was a Republican, but again, he's super rich, straight, white dude, tons of money, like wanted to just kind of uh, seemingly destroy the city by just catering to rich people. So we're like, no, let's get this Black woman, Karen Bass, as mayor. A lot of the same. Again, homelessness is up. They created a fund to like buy out buildings or build homes for homeless people and like get them the mental health resources. But there have been like financial audits on where that money is, and like a lot of it is just either missing or wasn't spent where it was supposed to be spent. um, you have more police now in Los Angeles under Democratic leadership than ever before. And so when you ask if I support Kamala, uh, I think and expect a lot of people in my life and queer people, and honestly probably a lot of people listening to this podcast right now to vote for Kamala. And I think she has a really good chance of winning because of who she is, her endorsements, etc. Uh, I think she made a record breaking like hundreds of millions of dollars during the DNC campaigning and all of that, um, which is great for her campaign. But I think when you look at the state of this country and who's been in power, um, you know, I'm willing to give everyone a chance and a shot, but I don't think that she or any career Democrat or politician whose funding comes from corporations and APAC, which APAC is like a Zionist lobbying group that basically they pay to keep people in or out of power. And essentially interfere with U.S. elections, even though it's an Israeli sort of nonprofit company. When you have these politicians, including Kamala, who take money for the interests of these huge corporations, it negates everyone else at the bottom who is working class and who is struggling. And I think um, I just don't expect her. I do think she has a really good chance of winning, but I don't expect her to save us or liberate us in the way that a lot of third party and Green Party candidates can. Um, but in order to get there, Green Party or third party candidates have to receive like, so if Green Party or a third party candidate out, so not a Democrat or a Republican, but everyone else, if they get 5% of the popular vote in this country, they get a ton of funding. They get to become like an official party because right now they're just kind of like grassroots. They don't get any sort of recognition nationally. So if they get just 5% of the vote, that starts to happen and it makes it more viable for them to win. And I think the most votes that because Jill's been running pretty consistently year over year. She didn't run in 2020, but I believe she ran in 2016. I think the most votes she ever got was like 1 point something percent. And I think that was 2016. And that was at a time when I don't think a lot of us were sort of in this liberation front. I have really high hopes that she will get 5% now. I've been using my voice and social media to try to like spread the word of the Green Party and Socialist Party. There's other socialist candidates that I really love too. I just think that Jill has more momentum because she's been doing it longer. But we have to get to none of the rights that we have in this country, black, queer, women, they weren't uh realized, or they weren't I'm trying to think, I can't think of the word. All of the rights that we now have as marginalized people weren't identified by being silent or voting for the lesser of certain evils. It was through protesting and canvassing and being loud. Oftentimes, it was involving police brutality and even death in some circumstances. Like, there's so much liberation that we have to go. But in order to be liberated, like, we have to liberate ourselves first. And I don't see us being liberated by voting for the lesser of two evils anymore. Not only is she black, but also just as a woman, I think I mean, racism is, as we know, uh, predominant force in this country, but also so is misogyny. And I think it's similar to what happened with Hillary. So it's, again, I'll keep going back to then too. Like, I think Hillary is another was in a similar boat with her platform, in which it was a lot of the same stuff. I think it was this sort of, on the surface, we support queer rights and we support an end to homelessness and we support equal wages and abortion rights and a right for women to choose and all of that. But when it came down to it, like, she didn't really sell herself. She sold herself more on vibes than on what she was actually going to do. And I think that was a time too where I was like, I don't really I don't like her either. But again, I was trying to vote for the lesser of two evils. But I think her downfall too was just misogyny in this country runs rampant. And so when you've got Kamala, who is a black woman, uh, I think particularly, I love those. I don't know if it's CNN or who does this, but there's a news outlet who has these demographic graphs and charts, and it shows how people vote based on their age and also their sex. And almost every single time, white men and white women, particularly above age 40 or so, will always end up voting Republican. Like they always end up voting against, in my opinion, against their best interests. But yeah, I think it's unfortunate that people uh and that's the tough part, right? It's like you want to support a black woman in her endeavors to like show change, and again giving everyone the chance to show themselves. But for, again, I can only speak for myself, but if it weren't Kamala running, if it were Hillary or somebody else who was running on a similar platform, which is like pro war, pro money to other countries to fund war, and less about ensuring that this country has money and resources, I personally would still be voting for Jill Stein in the same way, because I think voting out is the only way we can get up. But yeah, I do think it's unfortunate that like this woman who has worked really hard and she has a track record of like knowing what the fuck she's talking about, Kamala. Like, again, I don't agree with her policies, but like as far as job interviews go, I like to think of this in terms of job interview and who has the most experience. Like, she has a ton of experience, and I think that she would know how to navigate running the country. But I don't agree with most of her platform, so it's unfortunate. I mean, the biggest thing for me is the like unequivocal support for uh, Israel. She says Joe Biden and I are working day and night to make sure that there's a ceasefire deal, that the hostages are returned, and that Palestinians can have self determination and freedom and all of that. But she also says, in every time she uses that statement, is that um, she repeatedly quotes information about sexual assault and Hamas. Like the attention is always on Hamas about what they've allegedly done, and a lot of and I don't know if I can like share articles with the world or put them out somewhere, but like so much of that was not only disproven, but so much of the accusations that like our government in this country and Israel has towards Palestinians it has say effectively everything that they're saying that Palestinians are doing, it's actually the Israel occupation forces, their military, doing it to others. They got caught on video sexually assaulting a man in prison, and their country was protesting to protect the soldier, the Israeli soldier who was caught sexually assaulting this prisoner. There's just so much like, and it's hard, right? Because I think I didn't understand any of this. If you had like, I learned all of this stuff after October 7th, like understanding where this is coming from and how long this has been going on. And I think while there is a lot of like, I think every time you bring, or a lot of times when I bring this up to like folks who consider themselves Democrats or leftists, they're like, oh, but we just can't get Trump because Trump's going to do X, Y, and Z, or you always got to like vote blue no matter what. And it's like there's not like there's not a lot of convincing that anyone can do toward me to vote for someone who like is repeating like propaganda that has been disproven to justify why we can not only continue sending tens of billions of dollars in weapons without any sort of restrictions on them to another country that is committing these mass murders. But how much of our government doing that is preventing us from being able to afford to clear up like homelessness and houselessness, to fund nonprofits that can help with mental health and like uh, just general health care. There's so much that we are missing, yet we give so much money away to these other countries, specifically Israel, which is uh, ironic because Israel has like free healthcare and free education, and like we're funding it, but yet in this country, you know, the richest country on earth, we for some reason don't have all of these resources. As far as her other policy positions, I think uh, I know she's talking a lot about investing in the middle class and like giving first time home buyers, uh, you know, like some money to purchase their first home and build wealth. Which again, I think a lot of these positions are uh, like I think a lot of them are admirable, but under knowing that she's been the VP under Biden and she takes a lot of what his ticket and his platform was as well. Like 4 years later, the rich, the super rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer, and there's no in between. And companies like Tesla and all these other corporations, like we can afford to bail them out and give them money so they don't go under. The auto industry is a really good example of this, like bailing out all these companies. Which is effectively welfare. Like when you think about it, like you got all these corporations who, you know, need a government handout to keep surviving, but then those same people would say that uh, socialism or giving money to poor people, you know, they're lazy. They need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And it's like, how long, and again, not to like Democrats and Republicans, both to me, they're almost the same side of the coin. The only difference is Republicans are much louder about being white supremacists and racist, whereas Democrats, career Democrats, are more covert about it. Like, there's only like, how long are we going to be like? Is it going to be 100 years from now, and people are still going to be saying, "Vote for the lesser of two evils. We're everything. We're going to be okay." It's like we're already in fascism. We don't need to wait for Donald Trump to experience fascism. We experience it every day with the number of police. And I mentioned earlier, like college students using their right to protest against what's happening in Gaza and being arrested, and like uh, universities changing their policy to say that like Zion, if you use the phrase Zionism, which again is like essentially a Zionist believes that Israel has a right to exist by displacing and ethnically cleansing Palestinians from their native land. That's what a Zionist means. Like the fact that some universities are saying, well, you can't call somebody a Zionist, and if you do, that's hate speech. You're going to be kicked out of your university. And just like, it's like, how is that like? And this country, there was a, I forget what it was called, but under, it was before Joe Biden stepped down, but that was like a last minute sort of, I don't know if it's not a law or I don't know what to call it, but it was like an addition, an addendum to some clause somewhere that like federally, if you use the term Zionist, you could be arrested. And it's like, and again, under a democratic leader of this country, why are we so quick to cater to this occupying force when there's so much other shit going on in this country? Like the speed at which they're able to just write these laws to protect this occupying force should be concerning for everyone. Should be concerning for everyone. So why Jill Stein? For me, and again, I'm still learning a lot about her as well, but I think she has been, if you look back, you know, a decade, decades, however long she's been doing this, it's been a long time. I believe she has, I don't know if it's a PhD or master's from Harvard. She like her ticket, her platform consistently has been reparations for Black people and Indigenous people. It's been funding like houselessness and mental health in this country, giving everyone free healthcare, and not funding the war machine that is, I mean, this country is basically built on war and displacement. But and I think Republicans and Democrats continue to feed into that. But Jill is unequivocally like not into or interested in doing that. She doesn't get any like corporate donations, at least publicly. Like you can see a lot of that information on the back end about who presidential candidates are getting funding from, and all of hers is grassroots and going door to door and asking people to do it. Like she doesn't have money to like run ads on TV or YouTube or anything like that because she's that grassroots. And I think why now? Also her running mate, her VP choice. His name is Butch Ware. He's a Black Muslim man. I forget where he's from, but similar situation. He has been pro liberation, pro Black, pro queer, vehemently, like all of these things for so long. And I think it's time for people whose actions speak louder than their words. And I think why now is because something has to give. I feel like this country is on the verge of collapse for a number of reasons, um, primarily because we focus more on funding imperialism and capitalism in other places, and we don't focus on, and by we I mean our government, like doesn't focus on its citizens. And at some point you have to decide for yourself when is enough. And I think a lot of the criticism that I hear, even from my own friends who consider themselves progressive or leftist Democrats, a guy I went to college, or excuse me, a guy I went to high school with actually, uh, lives in Atlanta. We caught up recently, went out to eat. We've been kind of building a friendship. He saw some of my posts on social media, and he was like, "Man, if you vote for Jill, you're taking votes away from Kamala." And it's like, if you do that, then she's going to lose, and there's no point to vote for Jill because there's no chance that she could win, and you're just wasting your vote. That's a vote for Trump. And to him, I kind of just repeat everything that I said to you, which is like, Kamala and Trump, they're going to lose votes from their voter base because they're not upholding the values that they promised. And so I think if people want to say that me voting for Jill is taking votes away from another viable candidate, I would say, fuck yeah, I am. And I'm glad to be a part of the movement that is deciding, hopefully, to be a record breaking minority of folks who are voting for somebody who, again, believes in keeping money in this country, helping homeless people, like not paying all this money into the war machine, and really just focusing on our collective liberation as a country, as a people. Um, I will gladly be a part of the minority who like tries to push that up to the top.
And we're black.
And we're black.
I want to have a conversation that's a little bit unserious for a second.
Okay, tell me.
The conversation is about silk presses.
Candy.
And who does and does not have a silk press. And so what happened was Kamala Harris came forward and said she gets a silk press. It's not a sew-in, it's a silk press. And then a conversation has been had about whether or not Storm from X-Men has a silk press or if her hair mutated wavy. Because Storm has white, straight hair. It is very straight. Now, she does have afro, but then again, she does have afro moments. There are moments where you will see Storm with a big white afro. There are times you'll see Storm with a mohawk. Sometimes the mohawk is quite curly, but typically speaking, Storm has very long and wavy hair. And there have been some very fun conversations online about whether or not Storm is taking time between fighting mutants and bad guys to go down to the salon and get a silk press, or if she's doing it at home.
Okay, are we going in? Okay, we're gonna go in. Okay, I do not believe that Storm. I believe that Storm does her own hair, and she probably either has. She could. I don't disagree with any of that. She could have a wig. She had a weave. She had but Storm is North African. She is from either Egypt or Ethiopia, and folks from North Africa generally have a more finer quality of hair, generally, than African Americans. And so I think that,
or West Africans, I mean.
Yes. So if we're talking about like length and sort of the fineness of the hair quality, then I think that would explain, she may not have to do a lot of straightening for her hair,
Now, I've heard a theory
That's my
that
thinking.
Storm has created a climate around her hair. So while she's fighting crime, while she's teaching classes,
She
while
keeps it
she
the
keeps
moisture
it.
away.
Yes. So it could be humid out, it could be raining. But because Storm controls the weather, she's actually
You are
creating.
not reverting this hair.
Yeah, you will not catch Storm getting frizzled or her
Frazzled.
inches getting wet. Yeah, no Miss Frizzle for her. She will be Professor Storm. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that
Bundles, bundles.
Bundles Brazilian. But Storm is a hair icon in the world of
Yeah,
of
she
uh
is.
of I mean, superhero hair is always so iconic. Poor Professor
It
X.
is. Oh, but he can like make people think he's got hair.
He's projecting
Just like
the
me.
notion of hair. Girl.
Okay, let's keep it going.
All right. Well, listen, thank you all for joining us again today. I want to give a special thanks to executive producer, our production team, executive producer Tracy Marquez, executive producer Charlene Westbrook, producer Corey Nixon, and post producer Amelia Ritzhaller. And our music is done by the extremely talented La Femme Bear. That was episode 2. Pep, how'd you feel about it?
I felt good. I felt
too.
great.
I'll see you all next
I feel
week,
good
though.
that we're back.